Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 386. Great War of Saints and Demons. Part 1. Bluish arcs of electricity danced in the air, and the last android rushing towards them collapsed on the ground. Pushu shook. E.G. Hai yanked her sword out from the bisected cables and wiped her forehead. Level up. Gil Yang, watching her from the sidelines, picked his nose and spoke to her. Nuna, you've gotten really good at this, haven't you? She oh so badly wanted to smack the boy in the head after listening to his sky-high ego-filled words, but had to stop. You can't attack the target. Regardless of what else, these two kids were invincible in this worldview. Nothing good would come from rubbing them the wrong way. She alternated her gaze between Yi Gilyang and Shin Yusung before throwing them a question. What are your levels now? 84. I'm 87, Uni. What? But, you were 83 a few days ago. I lied, you dummy. E.G. Hai watched the two kids bicker and replied with a lengthy sigh. I'm still 79, though. Still, she was able to level up quickly thanks to these two kids. Just as the slang implied, her leveling up was lightning fast, as if she was riding on a bus, and that placed them on the list of the most wanted individuals of Next City. Android E.G. Hai, 1888G. More correctly, it was her alone. From the get-go, the kids couldn't be attacked anyway, so they didn't even show up on the wanted list. I guess it's about time we escape from this worldview. I think it'll be over if we bring that down, Uni. There was a huge tower occupying the center of Next City where Shin Yusung was pointing at. There was a battleship parked on top of that tower, and every time she looked at it, E.G. Hai would receive a message from her sponsor. Constellation, Maritime War God, strongly recommends that you acquire that star relic. Now that is surprising. Especially from our miserly general, no less. Constellation, Maritime War God, dry coughs. It wasn't as if she couldn't understand her sponsor's heart, though. Anyone who clapped their eyes on that battleship's appearance would indeed understand where he was coming from. I just can't figure out why that thing's parked over there. If they managed to commandeer that ship, then the skies of all the worlds would become the Maritime War God's ocean. E.G. Hai tightly grasped the hilt of her sword and spoke. Yeah, it might be fun to shock the socks off of Juicy and my master. Hey, guys? Why don't we clear this place now? Sure. It was getting boring using the bug all the time, too. Yes, let's. The three arrived at a mutual agreement and began walking towards the tower, only for a completely unexpected message to enter their ears. Emergency patch has been updated. From tonight's midnight onwards, the applicable scenario will institute shutdown system. From midnight to 6 o'clock, children under the age of 18 cannot utilize the applicable scenario. Yi Gilyang and Shin Yusung, merrily running forward side by side, suddenly began faltering precariously. The boy muttered in a flustered voice. And Nuna, I'm sleepy, Uni, run. The two kids plopped down after saying that and fell into slumber. E.G. Hai placed her hand near their noses and confirmed that they weren't dead. Applicable player is in shutdown state. For E.G. Hai, this was one flabbergast-inducing situation. What the hell? I thought this worldview was 18 plus from the get-go? Why is this shutdown thing even introduced? Too bad, there was no time to relaxedly stand around and complain. The tower's gates opened up wide and hundreds of drones began sortying simultaneously in order to kill her, that was why. Oh, shit. It seemed that this night was going to be a very long one for her. 113th Regional Conflict has been concluded. Outcome of the applicable regional conflict cannot be decided. This particular skirmish had no victors or losers. Heavily wounded Demon Kings supported each other and retreated, while panic-stricken Uriel vanished from here along with the lower-ranked angels. The only people remaining in the empty battlefield were reincarnators strewn about like the remnants of a defeated army, plus 5 men and women among them collapsed on the ground. I had no idea this would happen, muttered Han Suyang in a dumbfounded voice. What Kim Dokja Company did after entering the regional conflict was pretty simple: participate in the war between good and evil, and suppress every other participant beside themselves. And then, the remaining folks would go for it and slug it out for the war with no winners. Applicable battle's outcome can't be decided. Lack of will to fight by the participants of the applicable battle has been confirmed. The Battle of Kim Dokja Company was not a life-or-death fight but a game, a sparring session, something with no determined winners or losers. And that was why it was not a war between good and evil, and naturally, was not the Great War of Saints and Demons either. Applicable regional conflict has been excluded from the category of Great War of Saints and Demons. New 113th regional conflict is waiting to take place. The strength to forcibly break up a battlefield, that was the power Kim Dokja Company possessed right now. My sponsor should be really sad and disappointed by now. It couldn't be helped this time, Hui1 SSI. If it's at all possible, I don't want to fight against Oriel. It's the same story for me. With a slightly regretful face, Zhang Hui1 and Yi Hyan Song looked at the reincarnators of the battlefield. Although many had died and returned to the cycle of rebirth, there were a few who still managed to survive. They split the Elaine Forest essence in their possession and distributed it to the survivors. Kim Dokja too supported the surrounding reincarnators one by one and stemmed their bleeding by pressing their pressure points. Han Suyong spoke while looking at him. You started this whole thing with a definite plan, right? I always have a plan before starting anything. Then you should know that we can't keep this up forever. The timing for this particular conflict proved to be fortunate for them, but there was no guarantee that their luck would be as good the next time. Besides, there were definitely beings among the constellations on the side of good or demon kings that the strength of Kim Dokja Company couldn't handle, and if they rushed into a battle with a too great disparity in combat strength, they might find themselves in mortal danger, as well. However, Kim Dokja maintained a composed expression. We don't need to hold out for long, so it'll be fine. Han Suyong heard his relaxed midday tryst voice and hushed her own in reply. Okay, what then? We just have to hold on until the chaos points go past 90. Chaos points currently is 56. As if it was waiting for this moment, the message floated up in the air and Han Suyong shot a glare at it. What's this point thing about? It sounds different from the good/evil points, though? You're right. Kim Dokja briefly explained what this chaos points thing was, that it would rise up when neither the good nor evil claimed victory and the world's order collapsed as a result. What happens if that gets to full? The calamity of revelation will start. The calamity of revelation? Hold up, are you talking about the apocalypse dragon? The dragon of destruction from the Book of Revelation, also known as the final dragon of the Revelation, a being referred to as the so-called apocalypse dragon. A humongous calamity that descended on the 95th scenario during the 1863rd turn. It was capable of sweeping away the constellations of the star stream with just a single flick of its tail. Kim Dokja grinned and nodded his head. Right. You knew about it? You want to increase these chaos points even after knowing that? Are you insane? What will you do if the apocalypse dragon is revived? Have you forgotten what happened during the 1863rd turn? If the apocalypse dragon did wake up during this scenario, then it'd bring forth a scale of destruction incomparable to that of the Great War of Saints and Demons. However, Kim Dokja carried a determined expression. It won't revive. And how do you know that? Kim Dokja shrugged his shoulders and turned around as his reply to her question. She was about to fly off her handle and yell out at him, but someone suddenly butted in. You're supposed to be a writer, yet you lack imagination. What was that, you bastard? Yu Young-hyuk easily caught Han Suyong's small fist flying in. She growled menacingly. Why are you butting in on someone else's conversation? I couldn't endure any more of your pathetic mutterings, that's why. What bullshit are you talking about now? He's not the only one who knows about what happened in the 1863rd turn regression. Han Suyong immediately understood what he was saying. Indeed, Kim Dokja didn't hop over to the 1863rd turn alone, he departed along with 2 archangels in tow, and came back with one of them. And what that implied was, Eden also knows about the stuff in that place, then. And he's using that fact to his advantage. Kim Dokja's plan was pretty clear-cut. Once the chaos gauge reaches 100, the apocalypse dragon would be unleashed. And Eden was well aware of what would happen if that creature is released, since it had the information from the 1863rd turn. If they wished to avoid the fate of being destroyed, then they should immediately stop the great war of saints and demons. That was the crux of the message Kim Dokja wished to convey. Han Suyang felt ever so slightly flabbergasted while looking at him consoling the reincarnators with an utterly calm expression on his face. Just who in this world was capable of threatening a large nebula? That evil dude, He's basically telling them to choose between surviving together, or perishing together. If things work out well, that's what should happen. However, a future where only we are killed could happen, instead. Yu Yunghayak's expression was hard as he polished the dark heavenly demon sword. It was the most dignified, serious expression he had in a while. She could see his resolution from that expression. Most likely, his head was filled with thoughts of the worst potential situations. Kim Dokja's plan ends up as a failure, then the members of Kim Dokja Company are annihilated in this place, and finally, he'd have no choice but to regress once more. Han Suyang complained loudly. Is imagining horrible futures a unique habit of regressors? Only by thinking of the worst will you be able to prepare for the aftermath. Someone might think you've regressed 10,000 times if they hear you. In some other universe, that might have happened already. Didn't know you could say stuff like that, smirked Han Suyang, and she shifted her eyes back to Kim Dokja in the distance. Him still wobbling about like that reminded her of looking at an inflatable tube sky puppet shaking around against the wind. Just as she couldn't read the inner workings of an empty sky puppet, she also couldn't read Kim Dokja's inner thoughts. She sometimes felt as if she could, but that was nothing more than some air leaking out from the puppet, instead. Why was she even trusting that guy, anyway? Maybe, the one she couldn't really understand was herself. Why was she fighting together with Kim Dokja? She might find an answer if she used predictive plagiarism, but Han Suyang purposely didn't. She thought that she should not do that. She looked to her side to discover Yu Yunghyak staring at the same spectacle as her. Hey, I want to ask you something. It's mystifying that you still mistakenly believe I'll answer you earnestly. Right, you were one hell of a stubborn dude. I mean, you didn't even moan in pain once after you got tortured that badly during Keixenix's archipelago. His expression stiffened. I thought as much. You were behind that, weren't you? I didn't order it, but my kind Yuri understood my heart, that was all. Fable, Keixenix's king, slowly nods its head. Yu Yunghyak never once revealed his identity or information related to him even when subjected to Yuri's horrifying torture. Han Suyang dusted her butt off and stood up. In any case, you really okay with this? You were trying to kill Kim Dokja earlier, right? It doesn't concern you. A guy like you doesn't easily change his mind, so. That means you didn't have a change of heart, but never planned to kill him in the first place. Well, then. Who was egging you on? Metatron? Yu Yunghyak's thick eyebrow twitched slightly when Metatron's name was brought up. So, it was related. It seems that you've done your homework. I don't have spare time to do crap like that. Nah, I just brought it up because you suddenly mentioned Eden, you know. But, after seeing your reaction, I guess Metatron wasn't the main instigator, then. Han Suyang's power of deduction caused both of his brows to quiver this time. Who could it be? Who could have upset our precious regressor like this? He's not a being that someone like you would know. Yup, I knew it. It's that secretive plotter, right? Yu Yunghyak looked up at the standing Han Suyang. Her lips twitched a little as if to say, why are you so surprised like that? Hey, I'm not a moron, I'll have you know. I can easily guess the stuff your head manages to come up with. Incarnation, Han Suyang, is using predictive plagiarism. More correctly, it's the multiple MES, though. A fable where hundreds, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of Han Suyangs gathered together to predict the upcoming events. It was Yu Yunghayak's turn to ask this time. Do you know something about the secretive plotter? A really powerful outer god, right? He formed a disappointed face for a bit before speaking in a convinced tone of voice. I see that even if thousands of morons gather, they can't become a single genius. Wanna die? Fine, you know who that is, then? There is one being that I can think of. Hello? Who is it? Rather than answering her right away, Yu Yunghyak recalled his memories, instead. That bastard knew all of my histories. From the 0th regression to the far-flung futures, the ones I haven't even experienced yet. If my guess is correct, then there can only be one such existence in this entire world line. Han Suyang nodded her head in agreement. That sounds about right. There's only one with high enough probability. The two of them stared at each other for a little while, before muttering out the answers they thought of. However, who did you say it was? What kind of bullshit was that? Their answers were different from each other's. Chapter 387. Great War of Saints and Demons. Part 2. The first person to raise her voice was Han Suyang. What the hell? How can you even think that? Does one's intelligence get worse the more you regress? Taken words right out of my mouth. To think that a so-called writer would cook up something so unpleasant. She and Yu Yunghyak growled and glared at each other. And the first one to back off was also Han Suyang. Phew. Right, regressing 3 times could mess with your mind and cause you to dream up weird things. So, you're saying that the secretive plotter is Kim Dokja from the future? That's what I think. Fine, well. It's not completely impossible, I'll give you that. All sorts of crazy things happen in the star stream, and Han Suyang was about to say a novel can also become reality in our world, but quickly swallowed those words back. Even if that was true, she thought that such a thing shouldn't be mentioned in front of Yu Yunghyak. So, she said something else. Wouldn't it be quickest to ask the secretive plotter? Did you try to confirm it? He nodded his head. I had a deal with him. If I do something for him, then he'd answer a single question of mine. What did you ask him? I asked if his identity was truly Kim Dokja from the future. And then, what? He said that he wasn't. In that case, why are you? Let me be more clear. He said, once upon a time, I might have been someone, but now, I am no one. Might have been someone, but now, they are no one? Han Suyang quickly realized what was wrong with that statement. The secretive plotter didn't implicitly deny being Kim Dokja from the future in that reply. No, what he said was much closer to I might be Kim Dokja, or I might not be, than anything else. In that case, Yu Yunghyak not backing away from his guess made sense. Han Suyang asked one more time. Was that all you asked him? He knew of all the regression turns I've lived through. He was something once upon a time, but now, just a simple secretive plotter, a being that knew every regression turn Yu Yunghyak had lived in. Anything else? No. You kidding me? You fought like crazy just to ask him only that? Han Suyang yelled at him while panting like an angry bull. That guy didn't exist in your previous regressions, right? If you couldn't find out his real identity, you should have at least tried to learn other info, you know? I did hear what his goal was. What was it? He said that there was something he wanted to change. And someone he wished to kill, as well. It felt as if the more she heard, the deeper she was being sucked into the quagmire. By flipping the term someone he wished to kill around, you'd get someone he can't kill yet. Was there a being on the level that even a godly existence like secretive plotter couldn't do anything about? That's all I've heard from him. That was all the questions I was permitted to ask. You couldn't dig out more info, though? That means I'll have to make another deal with him. If I do, then I'll have to bear a heavier cost than the last time, said Yu Hyuk, and he shifted his gaze to the sky. She also looked up as well and activated midday tryst. Is he looking at us? I can't sense his gaze. That was a slightly disappointing result. They were chatting away openly like this so that the subject in question would hear them, but it seemed that he wasn't even watching them right now. Should she say it wasn't like secretive plotter? Han Suyong spoke. Well, this is problematic. If a godly being on that level decides to butt into the middle of something important, then no matter how good our plan is, it'll be useless. Especially so when on a stage as important as the current Great War of Saints and Demons. If a small variable could flip the table on its head, then there was no way she'd not be concerned by it. However, Yu Hyuk's thoughts were different from hers. He probably won't step forward personally. What makes you think that? The evidence is with him using Kim Dokja or me to carry out his schemes. If he was able to make a move, then he'd have done so already. An existence of his level would need to exhaust a great deal of probability if he intends to make a move. That makes sense. Who knew that the moment I'd think the shitty probability would actually come? I have something to ask you now. Ing? I still haven't heard the basis for your unpleasant hypothesis. Why did you say the secretive plotter is that person? Yu Hyuk's question elicited a smirk from Han Suyong. What's this? I thought you weren't interested, but I guess it does bug you. You never fail to add unnecessary comments, don't you? Just before he could grasp the cold hilt of his sword, a rather sly voice came towards them from nearby. You two seem to be enjoying each other's company. Two people's cold, murderous glares squarely landed on Kim Dokja. He formed a bitter smile and was about to wave his hands around while backing away, but then, a new scenario message rose up in the empty air. New coordinates for the 113th regional conflict have been set. The gazes of the group were now fixed on Kim Dokja. Finally, time to make another move had arrived. Well, let's go and cause another scene, then. As if they were all waiting for it, fables of Kim Dokja Company began clamoring loudly. New fable is sprouting in the Demon King of Salvation. List of candidates for Demon King of Salvation's second modifier have been generated. The Demon World's second-in-command was called by a variety of modifiers: Ruler of East Hell, Demon World's Proxy, Destroyer of Sanctity. Even though he carried many varied names, there could ever be only one true name for him. The Master of the Second Demon World, Agars. Ever since the Master of the First Demon World suddenly disappeared, Agars had been protecting the Demon World for the past thousands of years or so. He cut off the heads of archangels salivating over his territory, and protected those fables that allowed evil to exist as evil. While he tested the qualification of evil, restricted, and even ruled over it, he focused all of his being on only one question. What did evil exist for? Every time he ripped apart yet another living being, he immersed himself in that question. It was not important whether this question had an answer or not. No, that question simply enabled him to carry on. 113th Regional Conflict has been forcibly concluded. 114th Regional Conflict has been forcibly concluded. However, this was his first time seeing such a spectacle in the thousands of years he'd lived so far. Everyone, be strong for a little bit longer. We've almost suppressed them all. There were people rescuing the reincarnators from the chaotic battlefield. The expendables being sacrificed regardless of the outcome of the great battle between good and evil were being saved by someone. Now normally, such actions would correspond to the side of good. However, the problem here was that a demon king was responsible for performing that very action. Chaos points have increased by 4. Chaos points are currently 60. Warning! Chaos points have exceeded 60. Chaos. Neither good nor evil, it was something that existed outside of the world's probability and its natural order. You want to increase the chaos points and stop the Great War of Saints and Demons, is that it? Reddish horns sprouted up below the fedora pushed down deeply on Agars's head, which was his unique quirk whenever he was intrigued by something. Stop smaller-scale destruction with the threat of even bigger destruction. It truly is an idea only the Demon King of Salvation can cook up. The one to offer his opinion was the devil of lust and wrath, Asmodeus. Agar spoke, his fingers gripping the throne, wagging to and fro. Why does he not side with evil? Surely, he'd not lose out by joining this side. Once this great war of saints and demons concludes, his climax will be completed. It also means that the he pursues is not on the path of evil. Even then, he doesn't seem to be pursuing the of good either. This was a far more awkward situation than if he had chosen to side with either the good or evil. Agar's asked again. What are your thoughts? Metatron will make a move first before we do. There is simply no way that the aged angel who had been thirsting after this war more than anyone else would let his careful plans get thrown into disarray. Almost at the same time as those words came to an end, a single-line message arrived through the Demon King's line of transmission. Agar's, I've contacted you with a matter I need to discuss. The torn corners of Agar's lips curled up in a smile. Metatron, I'm sure we don't enjoy a relationship where we can relaxedly chat away our spare time like this. The highest authorities in the demon world and Eden currently were speaking face to face through a screen. Just from the exchange of their gazes, a powerful burst of probability sparks exploded out. I don't mind shooting the breeze with you, but for now, it seems that I need to borrow your power for a little while. Have you ever heard of a story where good and evil joins hands? Well, the stories of evil trying to achieve its goal by any means necessary are quite common, aren't they? Even after hearing Agar's sarcastic tone of voice, Metatron remained composed. There is a certain immature nebula, young juniors, that believe they are the center of the universe. It was pretty clear who those juniors were in this little story. Agar's chuckled and replied. To think, you'd use the hotline just so that you can trample on a small nebula. How amusing. If things go wrong, then even the great war of saints and demons could collapse because of that small nebula. Do you wish to instill discipline in them as a senior of the star stream, then? Your Condi disposition still remains, I see. Let's just say that I merely wish to teach them the true ways of the world. I decline. I don't need to join hands with someone like you, because crushing a nebula like that is nothing to me. I'm not proposing that we join hands. Then, what? Rather than a verbal reply, Metatron floated a small crucifix above his hand. It rose up in the air and continued to spin around. Kim Dokja Company was able to ruin the battlefields due to the fact that they have been exploiting how the forces are balanced, each side's power being equal. So what? But, what if it's a battle where that balance has been broken from the beginning? Metatron blew at the crucifix. When he did, its axis of rotation was slightly disturbed and it began spinning unstably. Agar's asked as if he was displeased by something. Are you suggesting that we create a battlefield where one side is at a disadvantage from the beginning? That's correct. Unless the combat forces of either side were evenly matched, Kim Dokja Company would have to try to shift the balance if it had tilted to one side already. If it had tilted towards evil, then lean towards good, and if it was tilting towards good, then push back to evil. If that situation was exploited inversely, then it'd not be an impossibility to engineer a regional conflict where Kim Dokja Company would be met with annihilation, too. And you want to start a battle with who in disadvantage now? We should play fair in this matter, at least. If we create a regional conflict with the evil side in a disadvantage, then I shall create another one with good at a disadvantage. Interesting. I guess that you dearly wish to kill them even at the expense of sacrificing angels. We can't sit back and watch the chaos points rack up like this. Also, by creating several regional conflicts, we will be able to disperse Kim Dokja Company. What if they don't react to this provocation? Wouldn't that still be enough, then? Metatron's eyes, as seen on the screen, were glowing in white light. If they don't respond, then the ultimate victor of this war would end up being good and evil, after all. Gate leading to 115th regional conflict has opened. Gate leading to 116th regional conflict has opened. Gate leading to 117th regional conflict. I chuckled hollowly while watching the gate's blanket space in real time. I knew it. There was just no way that Metatron or Agars would let this matter slide like that. Zhang Huiwen watched the portals that appeared and disappeared in real time and asked a question. Dokja SSI, what's going on? They've started several regional conflicts at once. But, can that even happen? Originally, no. Even if it's nominally a regional conflict, it can't start and end that quickly, you see. 115th regional conflict has concluded. 116th regional conflict has concluded. Along with the battlefields that were concluding abruptly, the scenario message floated up in the air as well. Plus, current state of Great War's progress, absolute good points, 57. Absolute evil points, 57, chaos points, 60. Plus, the good/evil points were rapidly climbing up as if to compete against the chaos points we had racked up. The one who eventually shot up from his seat first was Hyun Song. We can't just sit back and do nothing. He clenched his fist tightly and continued on. There must be reincarnators being sacrificed in those battlefields. Of course there are. But if we enter one of those, we'll all die, replied Han Suyang as she chewed on her nails. Excuse me? Don't you get it? Those are all traps. They made up their minds to totally destroy us, that's what. Hyun Song dazedly stared at me, and I nodded my head at him. Han Suyang is correct. Most likely, we will be attacked the moment we enter there. It'll be the same end even if we don't enter. The complexions of the group became gloomier after hearing Yu Yoonhyuk's words. Currently, the members of Kim Dokja Company were split up among good and evil. If the victor of the Great War of Saints and Demons was declared in this fashion, then the losing side would be met with a terrible fate. Obviously, the incarnation bodies would cease to exist, and even if one's luck was good and they became a soul, one would be tortured by the intense heat of hell and his or her ego would be destroyed in the end. We had no choice but to participate in the battles. It can't be helped, I guess. Sometimes, one had to step right in knowing that it was a trap. I quickly divided the members. Zhang Huiwen SSI and Hyun Song SSI, please participate in the 117th regional conflict. Han Suyang and Yu Yoonhyuk, you two enter the 119th gate. Hey, hold up, what about you? I'll enter the 121st gate alone. Yu Yoonhyuk glared at me and wordlessly grasped the hilt of his sword, so I quickly made myself clear. And no, I'm not saying that I'll really enter alone, you know. Then, who are you going with? Folks who will become our allies. This time, Han Suyang tackled me. Who? Who'd want to become our allies in the current situation? Indeed, no one would want to side with us, normally. However, if my thoughts were correct, then at least, there was one. No, make that two. Nebula, Underworld, is waiting for you. I smirked and replied. My parents. Chapter 388. Great War of Saints and Demons. Part 3. After sharing brief goodbyes with my companions, I immediately sent a message to the Underworld. A reply came back in no time at all. Constellation, Father of the Rich Night, has permitted your entry. Constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, has permitted your entry. Nebula, Underworld, has opened a portal that will summon you. Suchachachuchit. Now originally, it was not easy to leave beyond the scenario's boundaries when a massive scenario was already underway. However, the Underworld had willingly spent an enormous amount of probability for my sake. I was really grateful for that. I might be called their successor, but I haven't even paid them a proper visit to say hello after getting their help the last time. Now that I thought about it, I was kind of apprehensive, too. What if the reason for them permitting my entry without any issues was to beat me up for not visiting the Underworld until now? Kim Dokja. A message suddenly came flying in and startled me. I quickly looked up. It wasn't via Midday Tryst, which meant there could be only one who had sent me this message. What's this? I thought you'd be busy after becoming the branch manager. But you still have enough leeway to mind what's happening this side, too? No, I don't. I made time, though. Bai Hyung, floating in the air, grumbled a bit while sucking on leaf tobacco. This guy. It looked as if he was fatigued from overworking after becoming a manager recently. He stared at me with complicated eyes and let a long sigh escape from his lips. I sensed the surrounding channel's transmissions get blocked off temporarily. You're trying to do something really dangerous. When did I ever not do that? This is different from the past. This time, the entirety of the star stream is paying attention to the things you're doing. I think I've heard that hundreds of times by now. You keep this up, and all the probabilities karma you've accumulated so far will blow up in your face. You know what that means, don't you? I nodded my head. I clearly saw all the horrifying things that happened after the twisted probability exploded forth back in the Demon King selection. And honestly, I'd been often feeling as if I was standing on a Jenga tower, missing quite a few blocks lately. You be careful now. You can't stay lucky forever. Even if you are under protection by great Dakibis or outer gods. Under the protection of who? Forget it. I shouldn't have said anything. Bai Hyung shook his head and lightly spread some smoke in the air. When he did, the frozen channels began opening up once more, with the tobacco smoke as the center. Come back alive. Don't die. Is that something you should say to a guy heading to the netherworld? He didn't have to say anything, but I knew that, most likely, Bai Hyung had been stopping all the interference attempts coming from the bureau. He was just a measly little low-ranked Dakibi the first time we met, but now, he became big enough to help me out in this matter. Indeed, one had to live long enough first to see something like this. Transmission through spacetime has begun. All sensory perception seemed to split apart before me, and when I opened my eyes again, the blackened and withered grounds of the netherworld greeted my presence. It was the underworld. Originally, I needed to utilize the services of the boatman Sharon and cross the river first, but that step had been omitted this time. I walked on the graveled banks of the dried-up river and headed off towards Hades's palace for a while. The moment I stepped inside the outer castle, though, tens of thousands of gazes landed on me as if they had been waiting for my arrival. From the 3 judges of the underworld to the innumerable number of souls, judging from how ferocious the overall atmosphere was, I had to conclude that their gazes were not friendly at all. Judges of the underworld have discovered your presence. As expected, there was another purpose in summoning me here, wasn't there? Shoo shoo shut. Emitting statuses that might turn every living thing into withered, mummified husks, the 3 judges of the underworld approached me as if they were gliding in the air. Each judge was a fable-grade constellation. I quickly grasped the unbreakable faith attached to my hips. Even if I had grown stronger, it was not going to be easy trying to fend off against these 3 when we were in the underworld. It was right then that the leading judge's eye level began lowering towards the ground. That was the start. The second and third judges also lowered their eye level. All 3 of them were now kneeling before me. And the army of the underworld, following after them, all began settling down like a violent but low tidal wave. I took a closer look, and that volatile atmosphere I felt earlier was a bit different in nature to what I was assuming earlier. In fact, the judges of the underworld were looking at me while wiping away at their eyes, as if they were deeply moved about something. Kugugugugu. The underworld itself seemed to have knelt before me to open up a path. It was the path that led into the inner sanctum of the palace. Only 2 constellations were allowed to walk on this path up until now. We welcome you to the kingdom of the night, oh, heir to the underworld. Along with the judge's declaration, a system message floated up in my view. You are currently the prince of the underworld. While moving through the palace's interior, I couldn't help but feel a bit strange inside. I figured that something like this might happen after becoming the successor to the underworld, but still, experiencing a near vertical rise of my station made the inside of my brain go all soft and mushy. I had never been treated this warmly before in my life. On top of that, what was up with this rather gloomy and decorative costume? Character, Ricardo von Keixenix, asks you if you were also a prince. The fourth prince of the Keixenix archipelago, sharing the same vision as me, decided to say something. As I deliberated on what my reply should be, the judge attentively studying me also decided to address me. "Excuse me, Your Highness." "Yes?" "I'd like to apologize for the matters of the last time." Now that I thought about this Jesse, he was the same judge who greeted me when I entered the underworld in order to recover Shin Yusung's soul. He was the one who drank lots of Yamada no Orochi snake wine and helped me in secret. What was his modifier again? "No, it's fine. Things worked out well in the end, so it's alright." I was actually grateful back then. The judge lowered his head as if he was feeling apologetic, and pushed the doors to the audience chamber wide open. "The king of the underworld is waiting for you." I tensed up and stepped across the doorway along with the judges. The confidence-inspiring statuses from them guarding my side made me feel a bit weird inside, though. If I become the master of the underworld, I'd get to order around constellations like them. Foo-foo. I see. So that's what happened. Persephone's voice coming from the darkness interrupted my chain of thoughts. She sat on her throne and was busy chatting away with someone sitting on the top of her hand. Baat, Biat. Abiat. It was the same story back then, too? Baat, Biat. It was a little machi bouncing around. I knew who that voice belonged to. And even before I could say something, Bu discovered me first and cried out in happiness. Abahat. Abahat. Our young successor has finally arrived, it seems. I didn't know why Bu was here, but still, this wasn't a bad development. Persephone seemed to be thoroughly entertained by her adorable antics, after all. Hades' stony gaze and Persephone's warm, gentle one landed on me simultaneously. It felt as if my whole body was freezing up as this itchy sensation traveled all over me. As expected, just the glance of a myth-grade constellation contained enough power to overwhelm all existences. I recalled Hades' incredible battle against Poseidon and performed a simple standing greeting with a bow of my head. It's been a while, oh, father of the rich night, and queen of the darkest spring. Indeed, it's been too long, my child. Have you been well? Yes, I have. How about you, my queen? Foo-foo, we've been doing well. Although, we were a little saddened that our only son paid us a visit so belatedly like this. The conversation we shared had this festive holiday vibe to it. Since I didn't have any experience in things like this, I couldn't figure out at all on how to carry on with the conversation. Hades sitting on a commodious throne was looking down at me with an expression I still couldn't read, while Persephone carried a brightly smiling face as she continued to talk to me. The loneliness from your absence has been filled by our littlest granddaughter here. To think, I'd get to see a Dakibi granddaughter in our old age. Indeed, one needs to live long enough first to see such a thing. She must have really liked Bu still going baat. Persephone gently patted the small Dakibi sitting on the back of her hand. Although we have a grandchild, you still regretfully lack a partner. When are you planning to introduce us to your mate? That, I still need to think abo. The top question nobody wanted to hear during the holidays flew in at me right away. It was right then the silent judges decided to step forward. According to our investigations, there are several potential candidates, Your Majesty. Ho-oh, is that so? Yes. This data has been compiled after investigating through the Olympus's fate matching system, Cupid's arrow shot and help us DUO Venus. DUO is apparently a matchmaking company in South Korea, specializing in finding marriage partners. Not sure if I got the reference right, though. Judges, you seem to have done something productive for once. And no, hang on a minute here. Why were these geezers called judges investigating my private life? Unfortunately, a hologram floated up in the air without giving me a chance to stop them. Firstly, this is the candidate number 1. What popped up on it was a certain footage. Dokja has a Dokja's life to live, after all. A Dokja's life. Dokja SSI, that's a wonderful assertion. What the? Out of all the footages available, why did they have to go and bring out such dark history? The judge spoke in a composed tone of voice. Candidate number 1 is a deeply considerate woman. Not only can she accept our prince's peculiar sensibilities with tolerance as vast as rivers and oceans, but she also possesses a gentle, warm personality and natural decisiveness, as well as a wonderful outer appearance. Honestly speaking, she may even perhaps be out of our esteemed prince's league. It felt as if the more I heard him speak, the more dazed I got. Next up is candidate number 2. Following her, a certain woman sucking on a lemon candy and blessed with prim eyes as well as a distinctive beauty spot just below one of them appeared on the screen. Dummy. Why are you crying on a nice day like today? I mean, it's even snowing, too. I promise to think up a nice modifier later on, okay? The judge formed a contented smile while looking at the footage and continued on with his story. Although candidate number 2 possesses an abrasive personality and often resorts to biting, sarcastic remarks, she also happens to share a special relationship with our prince. She is the sole existence who fully understands our prince's dark hobby, and not only that, they can even converse freely regarding that hobby. Truly, a special being, with no one else like her in the... Yup, the matchmaking system of Olympus had definitely lost a lot of its marbles, hadn't it? Before the face of the third candidate could appear, I summoned up all my courage and shouted out. No, hang on a minute. I don't have any thoughts of marriage yet. The judge lowered his head as if he wanted to apologize and backed off. If the esteemed prince isn't ready yet, then the introduction of the next candidate can be delayed until the next time. I wonder who'll be able to tame this stubborn prince of ours. Persephone complained in a tone of voice eerily similar to my real mother. Well, if all else fails, it'll be fine to bring the Dakibi that gave birth to this child as your partner. Both Hades and I are not bound by humanity's trifling and old-fashioned idea of one's preference. Marry Baihyung? I'd rather kill myself. Hades and I will not interfere even if you possess the sexual preference of man who knows his ignorance and sage of idea. Judges of the underworld are waiting for your choice with keen anticipation. A small number of constellations are getting interested in your preference. Constellation who enjoys changing genders is paying close attention. I lightly sucked in a breath and quickly opened my lips to speak. Mother. Persephone's eyes trembled after she heard my words. What did you? I believe you already know why I came here. I've come to ask you for a favor. Even if the time flow was slower in the underworld, I couldn't dither about for too long. From the get-go, I had only one reason to pay a visit to this place, anyway. Please, lend me the army of the underworld. My words finally prompted Hades to break his silence. Do you understand what that implies? A voice that seemed to blanket the world in pure darkness began pressing down on the entire palace. An existence of the underworld permitted to lead the army. There was only one such being, and that was the master of this realm, the king of the underworld. I am aware. Does that mean you shall officially accept the position of the successor? I nodded my head. If you agree to become the king of the underworld, then once all these scenarios are over, you must remain here to rule this realm. Do you truly understand what that means? It means that I cannot go to the world of the living without special circumstances. Are you saying that you shall willingly succeed the throne of the underworld and be locked up here for the rest of your life? Yes, I unhesitantly replied. Hades slowly stood up from his throne and stared at me with a certain air of aloofness. Even though I've grown much stronger, fighting against Hades was still out of the question. My heart felt as if it'd explode from the nervousness, but since I was doing it, I had to see it till the end. The power of the underworld was essential if I wanted to win the great war of saints and demons. I shall become the official successor of the throne of the underworld. Chapter 389. Great War of Saints and Demons. Part 4. I'd become Underworld's official successor. Even though I was the one who said it, it didn't feel all that real to me. However, it seemed that I wasn't the only one who suspected the sincerity of my declaration. The king of Tartarus and the ruler of the night, Hades, was glaring at me. You have spoken a lie in underworld. Accompanied by the icy sensation, cold enough to freeze my toes, death was now staring straight at me. Right after becoming our child, I see you're already learning to deceive us. Hades rebuked me in a cold voice and stood up from his throne to walk closer to my position. I wanted to stand up from my spot right then, but my body didn't want to move. The status of a myth-grade constellation had currently suppressed my entire body, that was why. Thankfully, nothing untoward happened. Hades did get to where I was, but then, unhurriedly brushed past me and walked straight out of the royal palace. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned my head around to find Persephone rubbing her chin with a meaningful smile on her face. Is this the conflict between father and son that I've only ever heard about? For a tone of voice coming from a troubled-looking face, she sure sounded rather entertained. An eternal battle between a father and a son, with the mother in between. That sounded like a narrative deeply stained by the ways of Olympus. As if to say I shouldn't worry, Persephone lightly patted me on the shoulder. Only then did I sense the muscles of my body, frozen by Hades' status, loosen up. Do not be too concerned, for your father's personality has always been like that. However, your guilt in this matter is just as grave after daring to spout a lie first. You've never harbored thoughts of staying in Underworld from the beginning, have you? She perfectly hit the mark and I had nothing to say. I never wanted to take over for Hades and become this realm's king. What I wanted was Underworld's powers, not to inherit its throne. Hades probably had catoned onto my motives a while ago. It will take some time before that fellow's anger has sufficiently cooled down. I'm sorry. No need to apologize, it's true that both Hades and I already knew you never planned to remain in this realm anyway. Persephone's eyes arched to a pair of gentle crescents. If it's all right with you, accompany your mother to a meal. Persephone's dining table I hadn't seen in a while remained pretty much the same, slabs of well-cooked and delicious-looking steaks, as well as salad, laid out in several layers on top of a large plate. On the outside, they resembled foods commonly found everywhere, but I already knew very well that those were no ordinary meal. Bravery of an empress of swords who conquered the world. Wisdom of a third-circle magician who spent his entire life in a library. Will of a sword master who couldn't use either sword strengthening or sword manifestation. I wondered if I saw something wrong here and read the menu one more time. Hurry and have your fill. Do you not find the menu to your liking? No, it's not that, but... Now that you've become a constellation, you must consume proper fables to survive. You won't be able to absorb enough nutrients through the foods of regular humans. I hope that, as you're an adult now, you've managed to fix your picky eating habit. She sounded like my real mother by saying that. Your mother worries a lot about you, whether you're eating properly and on time or not, if you're getting enough sleep. My hand moving towards the fork came to a stop at her words. Have you spoken to my mother? Foo-foo. We've talked to each other a few times. If it was Persephone, then she was fully capable of doing that. The foie gras placed before me had this name, even. Heart of a mother sending her child away. This couldn't have been my mother's actual heart, now was it? I put the fork down and spoke. I see that the type of foods has changed since the last time. There were sword masters and archmages here in the past, if I recall correctly. The Isle of Reincarnators have opened now, so we should enjoy special dishes for a change, wouldn't you agree? I may look this way, but I'm still a member of the Gourmet Association, so I shouldn't be eating the same food every day. Her fork and knife moved, accompanied by rich gravy, aromatic paragraphs leaked out from thinly sliced fables. Persephone's graceful hand movements brought that food into her mouth. What she ate just now was, will of a sword master who couldn't use either sword strengthening or sword manifestation. And, some fables will disappear if you don't make an effort to consume them. Dying fables were disintegrating at the end of the fork. Fables that no one searched for were pouring out entrancing sentences on the tip of Persephone's tongue right up until she consumed them. I felt complicated while watching that sight. Persephone looked back and smiled. I'm aware that you are dissatisfied by the eating habits of the constellations. You probably don't like the way we easily consume the joys, angers, sorrows, and pleasures of incarnations. However, every incident taking place in the universe is destined to be left behind as a fable. You, me, other incarnations, and constellations will be consumed by something else eventually. The lives of all living beings would become the stories of the star stream. If we're bound by such a fate, then the best any constellations could do is to act towards preserving the most varied spectrum of fables. That is my belief. Leaving behind varied fables, and preserve varied types of stories. Maybe, what Persephone said might not be wrong. In her own way, she was pursuing what she believed to be right in the star stream. This was probably the reason why she was a member of the Gourmet Association, too. But, I was sure that she didn't invite me here to speak of her philosophy towards fables. May I ask, what is it that you really wish to tell me about? In truth, Hades does not want you to remain in this place. Does that mean he doesn't want me to be his successor? It's different from that. If I were to put it into words, Persephone spoke, as she began cutting the delicacy placed on the plate in the middle of the table. Hades, and I. We do not wish for you to stop as just the king of the underworld. That means Olympus has fallen. The underworld, too, has lost its former glory. Being satisfied with the position of the king of the underworld, now that is no different than placing your name on the coattail of a disappearing fable. Underworld is a good fable. And it's a declining fable, too. Indeed, the power enveloping underworld currently was not like this in the past. An ancient and withered fable, a story that got progressively spoken of less and less in the star stream, would lose its power little by little. Persephone's unreadable eyes staring at the delicacies contained deep-seated melancholy. Maybe, she had been constantly thinking about this, even as she dined on and enjoyed many different fables. The fear that eventually, his and her underworld would be buried under the forgotten alleys of passing time and become another stuffed piece in the Isle of Reincarnators. That is the undeniable way of time itself, as long as we exist within the star stream. The moment I heard her words, I was overcome by this unfathomably deep, intense sorrow. It was the kind of sadness that I'd never experienced before. Both Persephone and Hades would disappear. From the memories of people, from my own memories, and the story they had compiled would disappear forever. I didn't like constellations. I disliked their actions, and I disliked the way they peeped on the world itself, too. But why? Did I not want to see Persephone and Hades disappear? Maybe I didn't want to acknowledge this truth, because I unknowingly spoke in a curt voice. Why are you being so nice to me? I bit down on my lips, before opening them again. I merely came here to use you. If I failed to acquire the power of Underworld, then Kim Dokja Company would end up in grave danger on the Isle of Reincarnators. Even then, I came out and said those words. Perhaps I wanted to confirm something, as a human called Kim Dokja, and not as Kim Dokja Company. The fourth wall is faintly shaking. Fruit of good and evil is worsening your guilty conscience. Even if that confirmation turned out to be a useless waste of time. Persephone quietly studied me for a little while, lightly wiped her lips with a napkin, and extended her hand in my direction. Her eyes were gentle and friendly, with not a hint of animosity in them. Flustered, I tried to get up, but her status had already reached my shoulder. A very long time ago, we have received a certain revelation from the three sisters of fate. A revelation? It said, a successor to the darkest night, who will end the most ancient myth, will appear. Abruptly, I recalled the story Dionysus told me before. Several constellations, including myself, believe that you will be the one to reach the several constellations back then must have been Persephone and Hades. Meanwhile, she continued on. I was initially furious after hearing that oracle. Furious? Because, I possess the fable that can't have children. I had no idea that Persephone had such a backstory. Could it be that the reason why she had no children until now was because of that? Persephone lightly brushed my hair back. At first, I waited, wondering if it was possible. Maybe I'd be blessed with a miracle. Maybe we'd be blessed with a beautiful child who'd remember our stories. Even if only the darkness, hellish landscape, and prisons existed here, we were confident of raising our child better than any of the 12 gods of Olympus as long as given a chance. To teach our child the ways of understanding the darkness of other beings, to tell him the kind of hell that others could never sympathize with, and to show him the merciless prison punishing the evil that tramples on the righteousness of the universe. For many hundreds of years, I lived on in that delusion. The ends of her fingers were trembling ever so slightly. I couldn't dare to understand the meaning behind that tremor. I simply couldn't even begin to unpack the pain and the hatred towards Olympus contained in each word she spoke. Persephone managed to sigh softly and continued on. Hades and I forced our way past many things for a very long time. We knew that we couldn't have children, but we were never unhappy. Even if the underworld would come to an end in our generation and no one would remember the fables we had lived through, we are different from the 12 gods, that were different from those parents who forcibly passed on their fables to their children. That we are complete as just us. But then, one day, you made your appearance. Persephone's eyes were now looking at me. Actually, he was the first one to discover you. She continued on in the voice of someone in a dream. He said that he started watching your history from when you managed to survive in the subway. At first, I could hardly believe that there was a child like you. Because I believed that such fables were over in this world. I can still remember his excited voice when he talked about you. We watched a small fable that grew up all alone fighting against the world itself. We watched, as you challenged the mighty constellations, faced off against the outer god, and while resisting against Dakibi's scenarios. Managing to amass 5 fables, to be reborn as a small constellation among the stars. I recalled the moments of Kim Dokja Company being born a long time ago. Back then, Persephone was one of the 5 constellations who supported me. That was when we first began thinking about this, that we wanted to become your parents. I barely managed to swallow back a certain something trying to well up. I felt that I could just about understand the truth of the affection Persephone had shown me all this time. Just a tiny little bit. Both Hades and I do not wish for you to end up as the king of the underworld. We also do not wish for you to be bound to us, and do not wish for the lives we've lived, our history, to become the rules that you must abide by. No, all you need to do is to advance forward towards the end of all scenarios, like you've been doing all along. But, I am the underworld's. You're our son. That is all that matters. I didn't possess a single thing to repay that kindness. All I could give them was just the promise of a future that hadn't been written yet, the one without any guarantees. When I reach the of all scenarios, I'll definitely be with your stories, as well. Persephone formed a faint smile. Head to the terrace. Your father is waiting for you. I didn't have any good memories of my father. My father, drunken out of his mind and beating me up, dissatisfaction towards the world spat out like curses, and the inexplicable animosity aimed at me. I only had memories of a life where I simply had to endure and live on. Pardon me. Hades, possessing the shadow of the noble knight, stood waiting at the far end of the terrace. He was staring at the side of the underworld stretching to the other side of the palace. I didn't know what to say and could only stare at the wide expanse endlessly. I saw the tributaries where the river of hell flowed within, and beyond them, wandering souls looking in this direction. Do you see it? The deaths of countless people were there, sadness was there too, and so were the joys and pains of life. All those cherished desires that failed to come to fruition, floated down the river's surface. This is the underworld. While constellations were fulfilling their desires in the scenarios, souls sacrificed to those desires were swept into this place. The world of those who were discarded, wounded, and broken by the scenarios, that was the underworld. I shifted my gaze over to Hades. He understood this darkness and became the king of the underworld. While never turning away from the tides of sadness rushing in from the world of the living, while saving each and every one of those souls. While listening to other people's stories for thousands of years, nay, even tens of thousands of years. At that moment, I thought for some reason, I could say the words I held back for the longest time. Father. Hades didn't reply. Maybe, that word was just as foreign to him as it was for me. Still, he did reply. Command the army. I looked at him again, utterly stunned now. And in the next moment, I heard the sound akin to the darkness roaring out. Souls in the near vicinity of the fortress walls were rushing towards the palace. Some of them carried determined expressions, while others carried heroically grim ones. And in front of them all, stood the three judges. It was an enormous army, crashing in like a tidal wave. I had a hard time trying to hide my heart palpitating from the powerful aura of the great army that had not been seen before. For the glory of Underworld! The first judge shouted out. For the glory of the Underworld's prince! The second judge prostrated and looked at me. And as the third judge powerfully raised his spear towards the heavens, every soul here began roaring out in a single voice. For the eternity of all scenarios and their epilogue. As the roar continued on, the king of the underworld addressed me. Now, go. Hades didn't even look at me when he said that. Even though he didn't, he was still looking at me. He had always been looking at me. Underworld is your ally from this moment on.